This is the live podcast with Manuel, living in full expression. Most people think of kindness as something you do when it's convenient, when you have the time, the energy, and nothing better going on. We treat generosity like a bonus feature of life, not the engine. But here's what nobody tells you. The return on giving is not measured by what you get back from the person you give it to. It is measured in what life brings to you at the exact point where you choose to show up for others. In this episode, it's about what happens when you stop asking, what do I get? And start asking, what can I give? And what that one shift unlocks across every dimension of your life. And that is what living in full expression looks like in practice. Welcome to the Life Podcast with me, your host, Manuel. And in today's episode, I want to share with you an experience that my wife had last week and the lesson that gave me. It was raining, not drizzling, raining. And she had every reason to stay inside. The delivery was not hers. The person who needed it lived on the other side of the building. There was no obligation, no relationship, no upside she could point to, just a package that belonged to someone else and a choice about whether to care enough to move. And she actually moved. And what happened next? At the exact spot where she stopped to do something good for a stranger is the whole lesson of this episode. So I'm going to be telling you the full story as we progress, and I'm going to ask you a few questions before the episode is over, and I will need your answer regarding that. Because the truth is, most of us know that generosity matters. We have heard it our whole life, but most of us have quietly filed it under nice if I can, rather than non-negotiable no matter what. And that one classification, the filing decision, is costing you more than you know. So in this episode, we're going to dig deep into it. And so if you're ready, let's get started. So let me tell you what happened. Last week, my wife noticed a delivery in our post box, that was not addressed to us. It was not even addressed to anyone in our building. The label on the front pointed clearly to building across the other side of the road. Now, here is where most of us would have made a different call. We would have left it. It was not our responsibility, and we had not ordered it either. So someone would figure it out eventually. And on top of all that, it was also raining that very day. But she did something. She picked up this parcel. She walked across the other side in the rain, right to the address that was on the package. No phone call ahead, no weighing of whether it was worth it. She just went. And when she got there, she found a delivery man just standing outside that building with a package in his hands. He looked at her and said, and now this is the part that stopped me when she was telling me the story. He said, "Are you from the other address at the back?" And she said, "Yes." And he said he has been trying to find that address. He could not locate it and was almost at the verge of taking the package back to the depot. He had given up, and then she appeared at the exact building she had walked in order to do something kind for someone else. Now, that package, it was a delivery she had been waiting for days. One that had not arrived. One she had probably started to quietly assume was lost. She collected it and walked home. Now, our neighbor who saw the whole thing, while she picked the package and went to drop it off, said something I have not been able to stop thinking about since then. He said, "It is really good to be kind." And he said, "You didn't have to take the package, to the right address, but you did it anyway. And look at how you're able to get your own package at the very spots where you went to deliver someone else's own." And I want you to sit with that for a moment, because what happened on that rainy afternoon is not just a feel-good coincidence. It is a picture of something that I see in the lives of people, leaders who are building things that last. The ones who give without an agenda are the ones life keep putting in the right place at the right time. Not because the universe is running a ledger or maybe trying to be partial, but because the act of giving orients you differently. It moves you, it places you, and sometimes, not always anyway, but sometimes what you needed finds you right where you choose to show up for someone else. Now, here is the pattern I see in people who are technically successful but privately stuck. They have learned to operate on a ratio, a cost-benefit filter that, runs underneath every decision. Before they give their time, they want to calculate the return. Before they help someone, they ask what it means for their own position. Before they go out of their own way, they check whether the weather is good enough. And I'm not judging that. It is not a character flaw. It is not in my place to judge that. However, it is what happens when you have been burned. Maybe possibly they've had an experience and maybe people have taken advantage of them and they have one reason or another to go back to their shells. So when you show up for someone and they did not show up for you, you have that kind of restrictions to helping more people. Those times when generosity felt like weakness and you decided quietly and often without even knowing it, you decided that you will stop leading with, your heart and you start leading with your head. But the problem is that over time, that filter becomes a wall, and the wall does not just keep out the bad situations, it keeps out the very connection, the opportunities and the moment that your life is waiting to hand to you. Now, let me give you an analogy that I want you to carry with you over this episode. Now, I want you to think about a post box, not an inbox. A post box. Now, a physical post box, the kind at the end of a street. So imagine that you're standing at that post box and you refuse to put anything in it because you are not sure the letter will arrive, because you are not certain the person will write back, because you were just calculating whether the stamp is worth the investment. Things like that. Not because the post box is punishing you, but because the act of giving is what keeps you in relationship with the system. So generosity works the same way. You do not give in order to receive. But when you stop giving, you quietly remove yourself from the flow of life that returns things to you in forms you never could have planned for. Now, my wife did not walk across the road in the rain in order to get her package back. She never thought her package would be over there. She went because a package had the wrong post box and she knew the right one. That's it. There was no ulterior motive. There was no what's in for me. The return was not the goal for her, but the return came. And that is the life principle this episode is about. So I want you to pause at this point because I want to ask you a few questions. Maybe if you find yourself in the category of those who have decided not to, step out and give. But the truth is, we all have one thing or another to give. You have an experience to share. You have a story to share. You have someone over there that your story can help them come out from obscurity. So you can't say you don't have anything to give. We all have something to give. But then here's the first question I wanted to ask you today. And I wanted to think about the last time someone around you, a colleague, a neighbor, a stranger, someone in your world needed something you could have given them. Maybe time, a connection, words, or an act. What did you do at that point? If you chose not to give, if you pulled back, if you calculated, if you decided today was not the day, what was the reason you gave yourself? Take a moment with that. Not to judge yourself. What was the reason why you stepped back? What was the reason why you decided to hold back? Because there's almost always a reason, and the reason is almost always the same. Maybe you're too busy, not sure if it will help them, not in my place, did not want to look like I was overstepping, not in the right time. Whatever your reason was, I want you to write it down. If you have something to write them down, write it down on your journals. Why did you stop to give that request? Maybe you had that chance. What made you to stop? Now, if you're honest about that, if you're honest, I want you to know that it's not weakness. Probably you've had some hurt. Probably you've had something that made you to withhold yourself. Now, not in words, not with label. When did you first learn that giving came with a cost? That kindness is a sign of weakness, that leading with generosity puts you in a vulnerable position. Maybe somebody took advantage of you and you decided to pull back into your shell. Maybe you watched someone's generosity get exploited and decided that that was not going to be you. Maybe you grew up in an environment where resources were tight and every act of giving felt like an act of loss. I'm not asking you to excavate your whole life history. I'm asking you to notice where there is a moment, a formative one, that put a condition on your giving. Because here's what I know from working with people at the highest level of leadership and performance. The ones who protect themselves from giving generously are most always protecting a wound, not a weakness, and the wound is old, often decades old, and the rule they built to protect that wound has been running their lives quietly even ever since. If something just shifted for you, sit with that. That thing is what we're going to be working on today. Now, here's the question number 3. What evidence do you already have in your life, in your relationship, in your own history that giving without expectation had returned something to you? Because let's be honest, you may have given something before and you got something in return. Despite the fact that you have had hurt, there were times as well that you had given out something and you got something in return. Maybe not from the same person, but because you've been hurt so badly that that triumph, that return that you got became insignificant because of the magnitude of the hurt you received because you gave later. Now, I don't want it to be a theory, I don't want it to be something vague. Think of what you've received. The joy, it may not be immediate gratification, the joy, the sense of happiness you got when you stepped out for someone and helped. That's something to look out for. Now, let me also guide you. Maybe that would help you to remember. Maybe a connection that came from an introduction you made without any personal gain. Or could it be an opportunity that arrived because of something you gave your time to without calculating the return? Or maybe a moment of that showed up at the exact place where you chose to show up for someone else. That evidence is already existing, and most of us have not just cataloged it. We do not count the returns on giving the same way we count the returns on protecting ourselves. So I want you to name it one after another. Just name it, because the one example is not a coincidence. It's a signal, and it's telling you something about what kind of life becomes available to you when generosity is not a conditional act, when it is not something you do when it is convenient, when the return is visible, or maybe when the weather is good, but when it becomes who you are. Because come to think of it, we all at one point have received. Someone has given us maybe their time, maybe their resources. So now you have an opportunity to give. And probably because of how you felt hurt before now, you are holding back. So I'm going to help you with 3 moves that would give you an opportunity to break this hurt and heal so that you can go back into the flow. Now, these 3 things, you can do them differently starting from today. Now, number 1 is reclassify generosity from optional to operational. Right now, for most people, kindness is filed under optional. It is something we do when the conditions are right. What I want you to do right now is move it out of that file and into your operating system. That means making one decision before the week is out. Identify one area of your life where you have been withholding, maybe your time, your expertise, your connection, an act of service, and you try to give it out. Not because you know what the returns will be. Possibly you can even give to those people who you know may not be able to pay you back, because the act of giving is how you stay in relationship with a generous life. And that is not about being naive. Don't get me wrong on that. It is not about giving everything to everyone. It is about removing the condition from your giving. When I have more time, when the circumstances are better, when I know it will land, and so on and so forth. So I want you to remove that condition and give right now. Think of what can you give. Your time, your energy, your smile. Be conscious about it. Now here's move number 2. Audit the cost of the filter. Now that cost benefit filter I mentioned earlier, the one that you calculate whether giving is worth it before you act, I want you to audit it this week. Every time you pull back from a generous act, I want you to notice it, not to judge yourself for it, but to track it, because what you are going to be discovering is that the filter fires more often than you realize. And most of the times, the cost of giving would have been negligible. A few minutes, a small act, a brief word. The filter protects you from a cost that is often not even real, and is doing so, and it's costing you more in return. So I want you to notice each time you have a pullback. Why am I not giving? What is the reason why I'm not giving? And that is the whole move. Just notice it. Then the move number 3 is to choose the rain. This is the one I want to leave you with. Now, the story of my wife I told you, she went out in the rain. She went when it was inconvenient, when there were no economic benefit, when she could have made a perfect, reasonable argument for staying inside. Every day you will have a version of that moment, not a dramatic one, a small one, a package that belonged to someone else's address, a person who needs something you could give, a moment where the conditions are not perfect, but the opportunity is real. So you need to choose the rain. Not every time, because you're a human being with limits. But more often than you currently do, take out time and do something, even when it's inconveniencing for you, to put smile on someone's face. Because the question is not, what do I get from this? The question that unlocks living in full expression is, what can I give to my world today, no matter how small, no matter how inconvenient, and trust that that life will meet me where I shoulder. And that is a posture. That is your operating system. That is what changes everything. Your life experience is someone else's story. Your life experience is someone else's roadmap. Don't withhold that from them. Now, let me give you the 3 things I want you to carry out of this episode today. Number 1 is to reclassify. I want you to move generosity from the optional to operational this week. Identify one act of giving you have been conditioning on circumstances and do it unconditionally. Number 2, I want you to audit the filter. Every time this week that you pull back from a generous act, notice it. Track the cost of the pullback. You will likely find the cost of giving was smaller than the filter told you. Number 3 is to choose the rain. When the inconvenient moment of generosity arrives this week, and definitely it will, choose to move towards it, not away from it. Not because you know what comes back, but because of who you become in the choosing. If you want to go deeper with this, I have produced a premium worksheet for this episode. It takes you through a full coaching session in writing, helping you to trace your giving history, identify where the filter came from, and build a personal giving protocol that becomes part of how you operate. You find the link to get your copy in the show notes. And if this episode landed for you, if it named something, shifted something, or gave you something you are going to do differently this week, I want you to please share it with someone out there who needs to hear this. Not a broadcast share. I mean a direct one, someone specific who is doing life well but giving less than they could, because this episode is for them. And I want to close with this. My wife did not set out that afternoon to receive anything. She set out to do the right thing for someone she did not know, in a weather that gave her every excuse not to. And at the exact place where she chose to give, life handed her what she had been waiting for. And that is not magic. That is not coincidence. That is what happens when you build your life on a foundation of what you can give rather than what you can get. So live that way, build that way, and give that way. This has been the Life Podcast with me, your host, Manuel. And until I come your way in our next episode, keep living in full expression.